Oh, yes. All right. Hey, and coming up, we are going to talk about etiquette, and I mean real etiquette, gun range etiquette with our friends from AZFirearms. Coming up next on Get Outdoors with Mike Russell, KTAR News. All right, so they're out on vacation right now. They have you coming in here because a few weeks ago we talked about gun shop etiquette, and that was a big deal. We talked about gun shop etiquette because people. I would say it's a barrier of entry in a lot of cases because people don't know how to act. It's a little intimidating going into a gun shop for the first time. I think it's the same, really, going into a gun range or going onto a gun range, but there's different types of gun ranges. So let's start, though, with the very basics. Let's start at the bottom level. Let's start with the 4 big laws of the whole game.
Okay, that's a very good place to start because this applies everywhere. It applies in gun shops. It applies at home. It applies at ranges. It applies if you're out hunting. And the first one is always treat the gun like it's loaded. And I mean, I know that sounds elementary, but so many people don't. They assume it's empty, and we've all seen those stories on the news.
Well, in driving, start the car sounds elementary as well, but sometimes that's the first step.
Absolutely.
Or all the time. That's
Absolutely.
the first step, yes.
I can't stress that enough. You're never going to want to treat a gun like it's loaded until step 4, and we'll get to that. I mean, excuse me, as if it's empty.
There you go.
Sorry about that.
No worries, I got you.
Always treat it as it's loaded.
Darn right.
Okay. All right. The second one is never point the gun at something that you are not planning on destroying.
I love that line. One of my favorites.
Absolutely. You see that a lot in the shop. You see that a lot out on the range. And it's just one of those things that's how the accidents that you see on the news, the fatalities of accidental gun shot wounds and so on and so forth, is because they're not thinking either one of the first 2.
Right.
The third one.
And by the way, in the shop, you do see that in the shop, and we talked about this a couple of weeks ago. We're not going to tackle you. You're not going to get tackled. You might be gently reminded. Okay, watch where you always mind where that's pointing, and that's it. You're not going to be smacked or anything like that. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay.
But be cognizant whenever you're around firearms that these 4 rules you really need to follow at all times without exception. The third one is be sure of your target and be sure of what is behind your target. We'll get into this a little bit more, hopefully, when we talk about the different places to shoot, but that is a very common problem. All the way up from kids with a BB gun, they see a bird on a fence, they're not looking what's behind it, they shoot at the bird, and they're not looking, but right behind the bird, 20 feet away is your next-door neighbor's window.
Right.
And it just escalates from there. The last one is going to be, and this is as important as all the others, keep your finger off the trigger.
Amen.
Until you have your target in sight and you are ready to shoot the gun. That is probably the most common problem, is people pick up a gun and immediately their finger goes on the trigger in that trigger guard before they have done anything else. That's as they're picking up the gun. And
right.
But all 4 of these, if you follow these, there will be no such thing as an accidental shooting with the gun in someone's hand. End of story.
One of the neatest things I do with the kids, and I got this from an article on Guns and Ammo, is to play a game with your kids when you're watching TV. Like, my kids are into the Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. They love that. And they are very aware when a gun is drawn, if the finger is on the trigger or not on the trigger. And they will say, fingers on the trigger, fingers on the trigger. I mean, they will call people out. And you can pause the show or pause the movie and say, now, what's right and what's wrong here, and get them conditioned to know these 4 rules at all times.
I think that is an excellent way to integrate the 4 rules of basic gun safety with children, with adults, with your spouse, with your significant other. I think it's an excellent way to do it because If you watch TV that has any kind of action show on there, you're going to go about 15 minutes tops before someone doesn't break one or all of these.
Right, exactly. All of these, as we're finding, most of them are breaking because it's Hollywood and they're not so gun friendly. Now you work at a gun range. So, yes. As well as AZFirearms as well. That is correct. So, like I said, AZFirearms, they have the pros there. These are the people that you want to talk to. These aren't kids for their summer job selling guns. These are pros. These are experts with experience in this field. Now, we're here with Mark Janco. And, Mark, when you work at the range, tell us the difference between these types of ranges, the going out into the desert and the indoor range and the what did we want to call it, the organized ranges,
shooting or gun range,
right?
An organized gun range is exactly what it sounds like. It's designed for safety. It's designed for everybody's safety. Everybody is shooting in the same direction. They are shooting at the same time. There is structured shooting times, and typically they're going to be 15 minutes of live fire, at which time we're going to call for a ceasefire. At that time, everybody opens up their actions, removes magazines, makes sure there are no ammo in their magazines, and then my fellow range officers and myself will go and check each and every firearm that is at the range, at the front benches, to ensure of that. And then and only then are the people allowed to go down range and check their targets. It's not an unpleasant way to shoot, and if 15 minutes doesn't sound like a long time, just try it for once and see if you're still shooting after 15 minutes.
Hey, ammo's expensive. 15 minutes to shoot. I'm actually calculating how much money is leaving the barrel of my gun at the time. Absolutely. So
exactly.
15 minutes is a long time.
So the staff is typically, we're going to have at least, on a typical day, we'll have 3 range officers and a range master, and the range master is in a tower. He's kind of overseeing everything. So it's a very, very, very safe place to go, and we stress the safety part of it, the 4 rules, plus there's some other laws, if you will, that we cover with the people. Everybody there is, if they've never been to our range before, they have to see an instructional video before they're allowed to even come out on the range.
Sure,
so they're given the information before they even get out there. That is how an organized gun range operates. If any of you have ever been out in the desert in some of the more popular spots to go shooting,
yeehaw,
especially on a weekend.
It's the Wild West.
It is the Wild West. You have people that are, if they're following one of these rules, I'm happy that they're doing one. But the most common one that
hey, 1 of 4. We're batting 24. We're batting 250 at this range.
Yeah.
Wow.
And I would say probably out of the 4, the one that is most commonly broken when you're out at these open areas, shooting ranges, it's just basically a part of desert where people congregate to shoot firearms. The one that they typically break most often is the law number 3, or rule number 3, and that is always be sure of your target and what's behind it.
Sure.
That's the biggest problem. So the vast majority of people that go out there have good intentions, but typically that is what you're going to see. And I've actually done this with my wife on several different occasions at 2 different locations. And we got out of our vehicle to go set up our targets, and there were rounds whizzing over our head by about 25 feet.
Couldn't imagine, right.
And so that's kind of the main difference between the 2.
Are there difference between organized, like the Joe Foss, or an indoor range?
Yes, and I'm glad you brought that up. An outdoor range typically is going to give you much further distances for you to shoot. Like, for instance, Joe Foss has up to 200 yards, and it's anywhere from 5 to 200 yards. Indoor range is usually restricted on the distance. The other part of it, too, you're going to be restricted on what types of ammunition you can use typically in an indoor range, because they have bullet catches, and so you can't use any type of steel core ammo.
Okay, right.
Just not going to happen. The other part of it, too, is the noise factor. Yeah, right this time of year, the indoor ranges are cooler inside, but On the other side of that, though, the noise level is significantly higher because you're a little more tightly packed, and of course you're surrounded in it. You're basically in a cube with a bunch of other people shooting firearms.
Sure. Is it the same structure? You talked about like the 15 minutes on, and then is it usually the same?
It depends on the range. Some ranges are that way. Other ranges have where it has the electronic target retrieval. So you push a button, send your target out to what distance you want. You're done shooting. You push a button to bring it back into you. Those typically don't have that structured of shooting times and ceasefires.
Okay.
But others are set up the other way, and so they do have.
We're here with Mark Janco from AZFirearms, and I'll tell you, azfirearms.com. You got to check it out. Did you see the pump action 12-gauge double barrel?
Yes, I did. I've had
Holy
a chance
mackerel!
Yeah, that thing's.
Have you fired it?
No, not yet.
Oh my goodness!
Yeah.
So you got to go check that out online. azfirearms.com. Let's get into this because we talked about etiquette. I want to come back to the etiquette. Now we know the difference of the ranges. We know the 4 basic rules that we should all know if we've ever touched a gun. Before we even touch or see a gun, you should know the 4 rules. Let's talk about some etiquette. Let's talk about some different things that we see. And Cheryl sent along some ideas as well. Obvious, I think the one's pretty obviously. Listen to the range officer.
Yeah.
Now, do you see that a lot because you work at a range? Do you see the guys? I'm on my own program. What do you do there in that case?
Well, we do occasionally, and fortunately, it is just occasionally. We do have some shooters out there that. I call them Kias. They're know-it-alls, and typically they've been around firearms so long that somehow or another they feel like they don't have to follow the guidelines and the rules at a range because they know guns. We will warn them firmly, but friendly-wise. We don't, the worst thing you can do with somebody if they're doing something at a range and they've got a loaded gun in their hand is to scream at them. I know that there are some other ranges, other places that seems to be the protocol, but we try not to do that. We will warn them about the situation, and it depends on the situation itself. If it's a simple thing where they're going and grabbing for something during the ceasefire off the bench, that's kind of one thing. Another thing would be typically like you're going to see with a 1911 type semi-auto pistol, and so the slide lock is kind of far up on the slide, so they have to turn, they feel it's necessary to turn the gun so that the muzzle is pointing left and right from them instead of straight down the range. Right. And so guess what? They're flashing everybody down that side.
You're breaking one of the rules.
Well, major
breaking
rule.
number 2.
That's more severe. So what we do is we make sure they understand what they're doing wrong, and if they repeatedly do it, we will talk with them each time. But we eventually have had to ask some people to leave.
He's Mark Janco with AZ Firearms and AZFirearms.com. We're talking about gun range etiquette. This man works at a gun range. He works at AZ Firearms. He's an expert. He's the pro. We're going to continue with gun range etiquette on the 4th of July Independence Day version of Get Outdoors next. And a happy Independence Day to you. And hey, check us out on Facebook, facebook.com/GetOutdoorsAZ. If you haven't, text the word Expo to 411923. You're missing out. Text the word Expo to 411923 to get your tickets to Arizona's Get Outdoors Expo, August 7th, 8th, and 9th at West World of Scottsdale. Our friends from AZ Firearms, azfirearms.com, will be there. And one of the members of the family, AZ Firearms family, Mark Janco, continues with us. We're talking about gun range etiquette. Now, I want you to be the coach for a moment, if you could. If you could just break some of these down for me, just kind of list them out.
Sure.
Etiquette,
Sure.
rules of the game here.
Sure.
And then we'll just talk about it as we go along. What do you think?
Okay, sounds good. Obviously, I'm going to start off again with the 4 rules of gun safety.
Yes,
that's number 1, and that's universal. 2, again, listen to the range officer. The range officers are going to help guide you through having a safe shooting experience, and be receptive to what they have to say, because they actually have your best interest in mind as well as everybody else's that's out there. The third thing is going to be, depending on the range, you don't want to be anywhere around the shooting bench during a ceasefire. They will instruct you verbally. You will hear it typically over a PA system. That is a chronic problem at a gun range. What you have is you have somebody that's got their masking tape or their stapler or their headphones or their eye protection on the shooting bench. And so you got to kind of picture this scenario. You've got 25, 30 shooters downrange, and then you have someone going over to a shooting bench where the firearms are and reaching and picking something up.
No bueno.
No, and that is a chronic problem. And it's just, so when you're out there, if it is a range that absolutely requires you to stay behind a yellow safety line during the ceasefire, if you're not out, checking your targets or picking up brass, do exactly that, because range officers, especially on crowded days, and the range master, they can see you're at the bench, but they can't see what you're doing. So just think ahead, and whatever you need, if you're going to load magazines during the ceasefire, take your ammo in the magazines behind the yellow line. There's typically seating there and tables. You can load it behind there. You don't need to be grabbing for a magazine or ammunition off of the bench during the ceasefire. And I can't stress that one enough, but I think I might have.
No, I like it. It's perfect.
The other one is don't bother other active shooters. That's probably the worst thing in the world that you could do as far as how it relates to etiquette. People are typically, especially if you're sighting in a rifle for the first time and you're taking down notes and everything, you don't need someone to turn around and be asking you questions about it. Wait for the ceasefire on that. Ask them the question. If they're responsive to it, then you kind of know where you're at. But definitely don't do it while they're shooting.
Absolutely not. It seems like a no-brainer, but I think when you're there and you get caught up in the moment, and I think that I'm probably the guy that's going to get bugged because I talk for a living. I don't want to talk outside of this building. I don't want to talk to anybody.
I can understand that.
Yes. So I'm the guy. What I want to do is I want to get to don't coach or correct. If we could jump to that, I think this is a very big thing to me, because immediately when I read that, I thought of a driving range on a golf course.
Absolutely.
You don't just walk down and say, well, your technique's all wrong. And
exactly.
I don't think anybody does that. Why do they do it on a gun range?
Like I said, it's the Kia syndrome. It's the know-it-all syndrome, and it's just like any other type of sport. You're going to have people that feel that they're more of an expert than other people are, and they're going to want to share that information. That does happen. If someone asks you for your assistance, that's a completely different story.
I can imagine. Right?
Yeah, absolutely. On the other side of the coin of that, though, I will tell you, one of the things that is also a big bonus for if you're going to an organized shooting range versus out in the desert is, let's say you've gotten a brand new AR-15 and it's your first AR-15 rifle, and you're having a little trouble with it and so on and so forth. There are typically going to be, and I've seen this numerous times out there, there's typically going to be out at the range, at least 2 or 3 people that have built several AR-15s. They own several AR-15s, and they will, during the ceasefire, offer their assistance if a person's having a problem. And you're just not going to get that out in the desert. It's just not going to be happening. Typically, if you don't have bullets whizzing over your head, you're in good shape.
Yes.
But that's kind of on the other side of the coin. That's the other part of it. There's people there almost always that are going to be familiar with your type of firearm. And if you're having problems with it, they will offer assistance. But that's a whole lot different than going on and bugging someone while they're sighting in a rifle.
Let me jump down to never pick up someone else's firearm without asking, are you kidding me? This really happens? People are going to run up and understand. Most of my shooting that I've done has been Joe Foss has been at Ben Avery, but the majority has been at out in the desert.
Sure.
That's been the majority of my shooting. I don't know what I would do if somebody walked up and picked up my Glock 17. I don't know what I would do. Does this happen?
Yes, and I got to tell you, there's another person that actually works at AZFirearms, and they were out at a gun range, which will remain nameless.
Okay.
And they actually had I hate to say it, they had a range officer come over and pick up their gun without asking while it was laying on the bench.
What?
And It was a brand new handgun,
Wow.
and they dropped it on the concrete bench.
Ooh.
And so now their beautiful stainless steel guns got a couple of really major road rashes
boy.
on it.
I just can't believe that. Just how about just don't? How about this? We're talking about
Absolutely.
etiquette right now.
Absolutely.
Mark Janco from AZFirearms is with us, and we're talking about gun range etiquette. Please don't go and pick up someone else's gun. What's wrong with you people?
It's a personal thing. You know,
You gonna come grab my wife while you're at it?
Yeah,
I mean, come on.
exactly.
It's about the same ballpark here.
It is to many people.
It is, right.
The one thing I do want to say about that, though, if I run across a firearm during a ceasefire that does not have all the ammunition out of it, or even still has a magazine in it, I will actually call the person over and or ask them if I can. Like, for instance, lot of semi-auto pistols are right-hand eject, so if they have it with the right-hand side of the gun down on the bench, you can't see if the chamber is clear. I will actually ask that shooter if it's okay for me to turn it over to check the action, or do they want to come over and do it themselves?
Right.
But
yeah.
I will never touch someone else's firearm.
We're running out of time here, but I have to get to number 9 because, and obviously 10 and 11, clean up after yourself and have fun. That goes without saying, but I got to go with 9.
Okay.
Shoot one firearm at a time? What is this, Point Break? I mean, come on. Is this the Matrix?
You'd be surprised what you see. Now, this is kind of like a gray area. In that, a lot of places, again, you want to check when you go to an organized shooting range. Some of them only allow one firearm on the bench at a time. End of story. I can't speak for every other range, but we allow, more than one firearm on the bench at a time. But for goodness sake, don't try to shoot more than one gun at the same time. It's stupid. And what you see on Hollywood is probably half the reason why people do silly things when they've got firearms in their hands. End of story.
You might have seen it on maybe the Sportsman's Channel or something, but here those people are wearing jerseys. They're doing this competitively.
Absolutely.
And they're better at shooting than you. How about that?
Absolutely. And it's a controlled environment where, typically there's not going to be 30 to 100 to 200 people out there right around where they're at when they're trying to do this.
As it always happens, we run out of time every single week. Mark, thank you so much for being here with us.
I enjoyed it.
And happy Independence Day to you.
Well, same to you. I've really enjoyed this.
It's been a lot of fun. You can check them out at AZFirearms, AZFirearms.com. Look, if you want to go down to the shop, I'm not kidding. It's worth the drive. It is in Avondale. It's off I-10 and Dysart. It is worth the drive. If you're in the East Valley, trust me, you are going to be glad that you went there for a great shopping experience. Hey, more to come on the Independence Day version of Get Outdoors next.